It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my CEO guest is Rick Stallmeyer. Rick co-founded MindBody in his garage in 2001 and today serves as the company's CEO and principal visionary, ensuring that everything the company embraces, from product line to business development to team members enrichment, serves the company's purpose to help people lead healthier, happy lives by connecting their world to wellness. Rick is a graduate of Annapolis Naval Academy and served his country for 5 years in the Navy, and he lives with his wife, Jill, near the company headquarters in San Luis Obispo, California. Rick Stallmeyer, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brant. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. And you're in beautiful San Luis Obispo, and it sounds like you're having the same weather I'm in Connecticut today. It's a beautiful spring day outside.
Wonderful. It's nice here as well.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about, we always try to start the pod with, information about your early life. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, what your early family life was like.
I grew up in Glendora, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles in the San Gabriel Valley. My father was a small retail business owner. Lighting fixtures is the family specialty. So my grandfather, my father, a couple of uncles, 3 of my 4 brothers, all involved in the retail lighting industry when I was growing up. And so I'm the youngest of, it is, and I'm the youngest of 5 boys. So I grew up in that business.
Yeah. Working in the stock floor, I imagine, as an early kid and helping out retail, et cetera. Was it a retail store or more of a distributor?
It was retail and wholesale, and our sources of customers were people remodeling their homes, upgrading their lighting fixtures, of course, as well as the construction industry.
Yeah, cool. So your parents both involved in the business? Was that something that your dad got involved with early on because his dad got started with it, or how did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, well, my dad himself grew up in it because his father opened his store in the 1920s, the first lighting fixture store in Los Angeles. My dad grew up in it, and then he worked for his father for a while, and then when the year I was born, he struck out on his own and opened his own independent store in the San Gabriel Valley. Yeah,
got it. So brothers and sisters, or just brothers?
Just brothers. My mom tried 5 times. She could not get her girl.
And do your older brothers, are they still in the business? Did they kind of stay along and you branched out? And we'll get to that, of course, a little bit later.
Yeah, my oldest brother is actually still running. The last vestige of it. There's a very small store here in San Luis Obispo where I live now, and it's really more of a consulting business now.
Yeah, cool. So tell me about, what did they do to inspire you, mom and dad, and maybe older brothers? Were there things that you remember from those early days, either working in the family business or around the dinner table?
Well, I mean, first and foremost was just the sheer guts and chutzpah to open a retail store, to have one's own business. And my mom worked in the business as well. She did all the bookkeeping.
Wow.
And would also serve customers. And I think it showed me at an early age that you could do that. Very few of my friends had parents who ran their own businesses.
Yeah, got it. So very entrepreneurial family then in that respect.
It is, absolutely. And it gave me a deep respect for that. and also an understanding of how hard it is. It was a very cyclical business. We would have, flush years when things were really good, and mom and dad would buy new cars, and the year that we got a pool built in the backyard, and then there'd be a couple of years later, and things are really lean, and I don't know if we really need two cars, and maybe we should downsize the house. And so I grew up with this wonderful, warm family. My parents also prioritized just time with the family. We were into boating and dirt bikes. We would go out into the desert and ride our dirt bikes, and also water skiing. So them prioritizing that, even in the years when we didn't have much, was an important impression on me as well.
That family time together, great foundations. Outside of the family, were there other early people early in your life that inspired you? And if so, who were they, or what else might have?
It turned out a neighbor that's just a few doors down from us on our street that I grew up with was an executive at NASA.
Oh, a literal rocket scientist.
A literal rocket scientist, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is in Pasadena.
That's right. Yeah, quite
that's
close
right.
by.
So he was worked there, and then he got promoted, and they moved away when I was in fifth grade, but we remained really close. And so he ended up being a top exec at NASA. Was responsible for the space shuttle program for many years.
Wow, cool.
And a huge influence on me.
Yeah. In what way? Just because of the work that he was doing, or was he just kind of that mentoring type of adult?
Well, number one, he was a very successful engineer. And I saw how someone who had studied technology and engineering could be successful. And in those days, the most exciting thing going on was aerospace. And this guy had gotten a degree in electrical engineering and had gone on to be one of the key leaders in the U.S. space program.
Awesome.
And secondly, being part of these very large government projects was really inspiring. And he got us VIP tickets to see the Space Shuttle Columbia land at Edwards Air Force Base.
Nice.
And
fantastic.
That just blew me away. I was 14 years old.
Oh.
And I'd never seen something so magnificent in my life.
Yeah.
And so,
that's cool.
Yeah, that I think opened the door for me to wanting to be a part of something much bigger than being perhaps a local small business owner.
Yeah. Got it. Cool. So school, were you a good student, Rick?
I was. I was very ambitious at a young age. And once I realized, I kind of accidentally got straight A's one semester, and realized, wow, I could do this, and I could so I just got straight A's from that point forward. And back then, there wasn't these honors classes, so the best you could do was a 4.0.
Was a 4.0, right? Yeah.
And also I was really driven to be able to accomplish more in my life. And I love my parents. I'm very fortunate to still have them. They're 87 years old.
Oh,
now they've been married for 68 years.
Lovely.
And
lovely.
And I also saw the struggles of running a business like that, and saw academic achievement as a path to greater success in life.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Cool. And so anything outside of class? It sounds like studies probably took a lot of your time, but were you involved in sports, music, theater, engineering club? Were there other things that you pursued?
Music and theater really drove my high school experience.
Nice.
I was a trumpet player. I sang in the choir. I was in several plays, starred in 2 of them as the male lead. And also was in athletics. And so I was in tennis and track, tried wrestling one semester, decided that wasn't a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
unlike our mutual friend Aaron Steed down the road, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, for me, wrestling, I was like, just grappling with a bunch of sweaty guys. It didn't seem like really that much of a good time. But I really enjoyed the arts, and I enjoyed just what I learned in band. And also in theater is just the value of hard work, and you could apply yourself to something really challenging and achieve it.
Right. And I imagine the theater too is great for public speaking, right? Did you find that developed your personality and your ability to, be very comfortable in front of large groups of people?
definitely. If you can sing and dance and act in front of your teenage peers, you can truly do anything.
Yeah, strangers would be easier, right?
Would be easier. Yeah. That really opened me up. It expanded my social horizons, and gave me a lot of confidence.
You mentioned a couple of leading roles. What was your favorite leading role in your high school plays?
Well, I played Ben Rumson in Paint Your Wagon.
Ah, okay. Right.
Yeah, and
famous. That was a 30s movie, wasn't it, or 40s? I think somewhere back there.
Yeah, and I was Herbie in Gypsy.
Okay, great.
And so, that was a lot of fun, and I was on path to really go to apply to a number of high-end universities, and was looking at the Ivy Leagues, MIT, Caltech, of course, because I was going to major in engineering. Right. UC Berkeley, Stanford, and funny, I look back at it now, and I was just really shooting high. Like I was going for the most difficult, competitive schools in the country. And back then, you had this book. Remember the Barron's Guide to Colleges?
Sure.
And absolutely. It would list schools by their level of competitiveness.
It's a good doorstop.
Yeah. Well, I studied that thing from sophomore year in high school on. And the most competitive schools, I literally ticked them off and studied all of them and said, well, these are because we didn't have this thing called the internet back then. So you had to get the information from a book. And in that list were these service academies, West Point, Annapolis,
that's right,
the Air Force Academy, the Coast Guard Academy. And I thought that was really fascinating. And so couple that with having gone to Edwards Air Force Base and watched the space shuttle land.
Right.
And I originally got inspired by the Air Force and thought, well, I'm going to be an Air Force pilot. And ended up going to Annapolis instead.
Ah, right.
Mainly because the uniforms are way cooler.
And that's a full ride, right? They pay for your whole way. Yeah.
Fantastic. And see, that was the point. So my dad had strongly encouraged my brothers and I to go get our educations, to get our credentials, as he would say, and said that he would pay for any school that I was capable of getting into.
Wow. Fantastic.
But I realized.
Was he a college grad?
No, he wasn't. His father.
American dream.
My grandfather was only educated 8th grade. My dad was allowed to graduate from high school. That was liberalism back in those days.
Yeah, right. Before he went to work.
That's right. And before he went to work. But my grandfather told me a story one time of how his father came and pulled he and his brother off the little league field to go to work, that they didn't have time to be playing sports, much less go to school. So anyway, my dad had said, well, listen, I'll make sure you can pay for the school, but I saw the economic reality. And one of those downswings during the early 80s was a very deep and hard recession that we had in 81, 82.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
And things were very tough. My parents were struggling financially, and I realized there was no way I was going to put a financial burden on my mom and dad.
Well, and you were pretty far down the totem pole too in the pecking order, right? Did your other brothers also plan to go to college, or were they going to college?
Only one did. Only 2 of the 5 of us got our degrees. A couple of them started, but didn't really stick to it.
Yeah.
And so the Naval Academy deeply inspired me. It had
fantastic.
Probably the best academic programs of any of the service academies, and the Navy has its own Air Force and its own Army, if you will, the Marine Corps, and so there's a lot of different career options here.
Yeah.
And the idea of a guaranteed job at the end of it was attractive to me at that point.
Right. Fantastic. Rewinding a little bit, and then I want to get back to Annapolis. Tell me about any, kind of entrepreneurial things that you were involved with at all. I know you probably worked a lot in Dad's store, but were there other things, the proverbial paper route? Did you,
constantly
sell cards at Christmas time?
Constantly dreaming up my own business schemes, starting with a lemonade stand.
All right.
But the most importantly,
single digits there, I'm not sure.
Well, most importantly, in high school, I realized that the school was grossly overcharging for candy, and there weren't like really good choices. So I started this sort of gray market candy selling business, And
buying in bulk and busting it up.
Yes,
it sounds like, right?
That's right. And also
we've actually had a few CEOs that have done that. Believe it or not, I think this is the second or third time we've heard it.
Well, my big innovation was Rice Krispie treats, and so Rice Krispie treats. I mean, these things were like gold, and I'd sell like this good size little, the size of the palm of your hand Rice Krispie treat that was 50 cents. I'd come to school with a gym bag full of them and I'd clear them out. So I basically paid for my first car with that.
Oh, that's great.
And working at my dad's shop.
Awesome. Great. Well, back to Annapolis. So, did you choose engineering as a stream of study? Is the curriculum there more kind of set depending on, kind of where you enter, or how does that work at Annapolis?
Well, it's a 4-year university. It's an engineering school, and everyone gets a basic engineering curriculum, but they do have engineering majors. And so I went in declaring aerospace engineer, and quickly got humbled my freshman year, which is called the plebe year. And through a combination of just the academic rigor of it and the difficulty of that first year, which is really like a year of boot camp.
Yes.
I didn't do so well academically. I went from a straight A student to about a 2.1 GPA. Tough. And got D's in freshman chemistry and calculus, and thought, you know what, maybe I don't have to major in engineering, and I could. Meanwhile, I was getting an A in history and an A in English,
right.
And so I shifted. I became a political science major with a focus on international relations, and ultimately a minor in Russian language.
So they really offer a full range of majors, even at
they do. It's a real university.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. And did you work at all, in the summers? Did you have part-time jobs? I'm sure it was a pretty tough curriculum, but did you have time for that? Or
the Navy is your job. You spend all summer training out on ships or
of course, right.
Yeah. So there's no time to work, but you're getting paid. You're getting paid half of an ensign's salary, which was not bad. So I was from the time I was 18, I was fully self-sufficient for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. So when you graduated then did you have a commitment to spend 3 or 4 years, or how does that work?
6 years. Yeah.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah. 5 years active,
tell us about
and
that.
1 year in reserves.
Yeah.
Well, I my senior year, the commandant of midshipmen, who was kind of like the provost of a university.
Okay.
He is this big old cigar chomping submarine commander, and he got permission from the Pentagon to show us, my graduating class, secret films of U.S. submarine operations. And this was in the Cold War. This was in 1986 when we saw these videos.
Yeah, it's the mid 80s. Yeah.
And he explained to us that the submarine service was really at the tip of the spear in our defense against the Soviet Union, that the Soviets outnumbered us in submarines 3-1, that fortunately our submarines were better, and we were quieter, and we had better electronics and systems, and we had better trained crew and officers.
Right.
And he said that if we ever come to blows with the Soviet Union, that the submarine force would decide it. Wow. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. That's the
front edge.
So me and about 600 other people from my class volunteer for submarine service. We which means you have to go to the Bureau of Naval Reactors, which is near the Pentagon in Crystal City, Virginia, and be interviewed. And the purpose of the interview is to test your academic engineering capabilities. And remember, I majored in political science. So
right.
So you'd go to these one-on-one meetings where they would quiz you on calculus and chemistry and physics and thermodynamics. I got very fortunate. I happened to be asked a few questions that I knew. And at the end, the ultimate culminating interview is with the chief of naval reactors, and it used to be Hyman Rickover. He was the father of the nuclear
I remember
Navy.
That name. Yeah,
Rickover had just retired a few years prior, and this guy's name was Admiral McKee. And I walk into his office, and he's got this dossier open with my profile, and he looks up at me and he says, "Political science? Why the hell did you major in political science?" And I said, "Well, sir, I've been studying Russian history and culture, the language, the nature of the Soviet Union and communism. And if we go to blows against the Soviets, you're going to want me in one of those submarines."
Ooh, great response.
And I got in.
How did he react?
He kind of sat back in his chair.
That.
We had a few more commentary, and so they let me in, which means I then had to go effectively after I graduated, get the equivalent of a master's degree in nuclear engineering. So I'm a really weird.
Was that out at Monterey, or did you do that?
No, it's done at the schools are at the time. The school is in Florida, Orlando, Florida, the Naval Nuclear Power School, and it involves a year of study and also practical how to operate a land-based reactor, because it's all about learning. A nuclear submarine is like a city.
Right.
It's got its own power system, its own life support systems. It's the most complicated thing ever created by human beings, probably, right around the Apollo program as far as how complex it is.
Right.
And, at our peak, we were running 100 of those submarines around the world. And so it was really challenging and enormous amounts of hard work. I'll hear young people say, I'm working 70 hours a week. And I was like, no, you're not. I know what 70 hours a week is, because if you do 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's 60.
That's 60, right?
And now you've only got 10 left. You'd have to work another 5 hours a day on Saturday, each on Sunday.
Right.
That would be a 70-hour week.
Yeah.
And the reason I knew that is because I was one of the guys.
Had shifts.
I was seriously struggling to get through that program, and so they put me on mandatory study hours. Me and the other rocks that were at the bottom of the class, and who didn't major in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, or systems engineering, or even nuclear engineering. And so got through that program, got assigned to a U.S. fast attack nuclear submarine out of San Diego called the USS Chicago.
Awesome.
And served on that submarine for about 3 years, and total active duty of 6 years.
Did they throw you right into leadership responsibility?
They do, right out of the gate. Yeah.
Right out of the gate, yeah.
The submarine, the fast attack submarine, has about 130 to 150 people on board.
Yeah.
There's approximately 13 officers, so about one for every 10, or one for every, I guess, 12 enlisted men. And so right away when I arrived at the ship, a month shy of my 24th birthday, I was made the electrical officer, and had 13 guys working for me who were electricians' mates. And the enlisted people on Navy ships, and particularly in submarines, are the technical experts. They're the ones that actually operate the systems.
Right. And probably older, right? I would imagine they were older than you for the most part.
Some of them were, yeah. I mean, the enlisted guys were probably, the average age on a U.S. Navy ship is early 20s.
Oh, still pretty young. Yeah.
And I remember the captain, we always called the captain the old man, and he was 38 years old. And so, it taught me that really, normal people can do extraordinary things with the right kind of inspiration and effective leadership and training. And so the Navy is just really good at developing people. And I learned a lot of important characteristics at that time that have helped me in my career ever since, and frankly have a lot to do with mind-body success.
What were some of the best and worst lessons that you learned from some of those former commanding officers? And no names need to be mentioned.
Yeah. Well, the most important lesson was just how important it is to be truly competent in what you're doing. Competent with a capital C, meaning you actually know the right answer. You're not just appearing to know. You've done the hard work, and you're constantly challenging yourself to be better in your knowledge and understanding of the ship and its systems, and that's unbelievably complex.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it, when you arrive on the ship as a junior officer is that the enlisted guys are actually responsible in large part for training you and teaching you. You go around and you get what's called a checkout, where you have to learn a particular system. Like imagine like a particular component of an air conditioning system. You have to learn all of it. And then the checkout is the guy who actually manages that thing, asking you questions about it and how it operates, and you demonstrating that you actually know it. So that level of rigor was deeply impactful for me.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, I'm responsible for these people, the ones that work for me. And I could think of plenty of mistakes I made at the time, trying to appear that I had it all together and I knew what I was doing. At times when it would have been better to just seek the help of the people that I was responsible for.
Yeah. Great lesson. What about some of the, we all have had former bosses or commanding officers in your case that, you see that behavior and you go, boy, I will never do that. That's such a great lesson on how not to lead other people. Was there any of that, or was the Navy much better at maybe sorting some of those things out with the people they promoted into leadership roles?
Well, I was very fortunate that both commanding officers I had were excellent and distinctly different kinds of personalities. One of them was a Naval Academy grad like me. The other had gone to Auburn and had served a distinguished 20-year career, Captain Glenn Ward. And the quality of their leadership was deeply inspiring to me. Now, I knew some other officers on board, not so great, and saw plenty of bad examples, and mostly around just lack of empathy, lack of EQ.
Caring for others.
Caring for others, and also just seeing what's happening around them. Yeah. And, stressful situations bring out people's true character.
Sure.
And some people in times of stress, well, they get closer to the people around them. They get closer to the band of brothers, if you will. Others in times of stress, they kind of go inward and they retreat emotionally. And you could see the people that, well, if we ever did go to battle, you'd want to be in battle with, and the people that you didn't want to be with.
Who had your back. Yeah, cool. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. I know that you've been involved in Mind Body. I think you said 16, 17 years. Is that right? When we spoke a couple of weeks ago?
19.
We started, 19, okay.
We started the business in the fall of 2000.
So was that straight out of your military experience, or were there some things in between?
No, it wasn't. Actually, I left the Navy in 94.
Okay.
And
a few years there.
Yeah. And then I went to work for a couple different jobs. I signed up for a chemical company for a sales engineering job. And that lasted 9 months before I realized I didn't really want to do that.
Right.
And in fact, I got fired from that job. And it's because the boss asked me one day, he said, "Rick, don't you trust me?" And I said, "No." And so he fired me the next day. And I was really not happy in the job. I didn't feel that he had been straight with me in explaining it. And I look back in it now and I see my own role in that. I see the perhaps the arrogance that I had coming out of the Navy and into that role. And if I saw the guy today, I'd buy him a beer and thank him, because he set me into a course.
On another course, yeah.
That's right. And so I've always remembered that when I have to let go of somebody, you're probably doing them a favor, because if they're in the role and they're not succeeding, and they're taxing the organization rather than helping the organization, well, that's probably wasn't their aspiration either. And it's the job, responsibility of the leader to make those hard calls. And well,
my day job's an executive recruiter, so I always use the euphemism, releasing them to the industry.
It's true. You're setting them free.
Absolutely.
At the time, I had a daughter and a wife pregnant with our second.
Wow.
And a house in San Diego that was underwater because I'd bought it on a VA loan, and the real estate market was going backwards.
Right.
And so I didn't feel any freedom to leave that job. And he gave me a kick out the door, and I
Best
frankly,
thing you ever did.
I needed it. Yeah, I needed
Right.
it. It reset me. My dad gave me some great advice at the time. He said, he says, you've worked really, really hard at this point. At this point, I'm 20, 8 years old.
Mm-hmm,
And he says, take the time to really think through what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a job for Commonwealth Edison, which is a nuclear utility company in Chicago.
Oh.
And not what I really wanted to do, but at least a more stable environment. And
did you move the family there?
We did. We moved to the Northern Illinois.
Big change from San Diego.
Big change.
Yeah.
And I did that job for a little under 3 years, and then really wanted to get my wife and I wanted to get our family back to California.
Right. A couple of those Chicago winters can be pretty brutal for a Californian.
Builds character. And,
exactly.
I learned some really
muscles from shuffling all that snow.
Well, I really learned some good qualities from those folks that I worked with there, and
Midwestern stock.
Yeah, Midwestern stock, very stable, hardy people.
Yeah.
They really care for each other. A lot less sort of on the surface than perhaps a classic California type person, and so that was actually quite good for me. But the job that really changed everything was getting hired in space launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. So go back to the very beginning of the story. I'd gone to Vandenberg and actually seen a rocket launch.
Oh, fantastic! Through your mentor, right?
Through the mentor,
yeah.
And one of the NASA satellite launches. So now I was in launch operation and support at Vandenberg. That's what got me to the California Central Coast, San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
And that's when my old buddy from high school, Blake Beltram, a guy I'd met in doing plays.
Right. Yeah.
Told me about this software he was writing for yoga, Pilates, and spinning studios.
So 19 years ago, so literally the turn of the century, right? Is that the year that you guys were founded?
We were founded then. That's right. The conversation started a couple of years before that, but we actually got going in 2000. That's right.
So tell us a little bit about what MindBody does.
MindBody, at its core, is a software solution for boutique fitness, salon, spa, and wellness businesess. Okay. And what we do is like an ERP. It runs everything for the business. We manage their schedules,
scheduling,
their CRM, their staff, how they pay their staff, their retail point of sale. 90% of the businesses we serve, more than 90%, sell products. You think about a yoga studio selling mats or clothing.
High margin items too, for the most part.
It's an important part of their income.
Sure.
And so we have a full retail point of sale system. We do all the payment processing. We're going to process about $12 billion in payments through our system this year.
Great. And it never existed before. There was no competition in that industry, or were they kind of people bootlegging different types of software?
There were a couple of competitors. And in fact, there was actually one called YogaSoft and another one called Yoga Counts.
Right.
And so we weren't the first ones with the idea, but we definitely were more tenacious, and we had perhaps a bigger vision about where we could go with it. It was always our intention to create a marketplace, to create a place that would connect people to these businesses, to help them find and book the classes and appointments they want, to help them to rate and review those classes. And so from the very beginning, it was a B2C vision executed through a B2B solution. So the other side of MindBody is we are now a rapidly growing consumer brand. And we have a couple million monthly active users of the MindBody app, for example. It's an app you can download from the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can think of it as kind of like an Uber of wellness. And so somebody called it, or an open table of wellness if you use an older reference. Yeah.
Awesome. And Blake's still involved in the business?
He is, yeah.
Okay. Did you guys start?
He left for several years and then came back. And so he's our MindBody evangelist today.
Okay. And did you start as CEO? Was that kind of how you guys divide and conquer? He was more product development, and You were on the management side, or how did you
Yeah.
kind of divide responsibilities early on?
Early on, we were just called ourselves partners,
Right,
and
right.
we're 50-50 owners of the LLC. I remember at the time we formed the LLC, we had to make a decision. Well, an LLC has to have an LLC manager, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
there's no official title of CEO. And I remember us having a conversation. Well, do you want to be the manager, or I'll be the manager? So I just, I'll take it.
Flip a coin.
Because he didn't really want to be bothered too much with that
Right.
paperwork. And before long, we decided that he would be head of product and I'd be president. And well, the story gets really interesting because we had a pretty bad breakup in our relationship in 2003, and we just had differing visions about where the company should go.
Yeah.
And
was that the time that he left then?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it had in large part to do with what I started seeing was that the desktop software, which is the original product that he had designed, that just wasn't going to scale. And we would install the software on PCs in these studios. And imagine like a 5-location local chain business
Right.
in New York, for example, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Midtown, and Soho. And we were using internet connectivity to synchronize the data of the local databases. And then we were synchronizing that to a web scheduling tool that we had built. And there was just way too many moving parts. It was too complicated. It broke a lot. And we were like the Dutch boys with our fingers in the dike trying to keep it all running. and by
Fingers
the time,
and toes, probably. Yeah.
by the time we got to about 500 installed locations, it just was really clear it wasn't going to scale. And meanwhile, there were some
Right. interesting
interesting brands emerging. In fact, some of the brands that are today dominant in the industry were emerging back then. This was 2003 and 2004. So YogaWorks had at that time about 12 locations in California and New York. Pure Yoga, which is Hong Kong based, and started growing outside of Hong Kong. They had multiple locations in Hong Kong, but they also opened up in Singapore and Taiwan, and had plans for mainland China. And our systems weren't going to scale with them. So I had this kind of breakthrough moment where I realized that we had all the data on our web server. The web server itself was there for the purpose of consumer booking, but we could add the functionality to that web product to turn it into a full version of our software.
Oh.
And that's basically the product spec that I gave to our head of product technology at the time, Chet Brandenburg, and say, Chet, can you take everything the desktop software does and reverse engineer it into our web scheduler? And he said, yeah, I can do that. And 6 months later, we released the prototype.
Yeah.
But what I was doing was killing Blake's baby. I mean, he had spent 5 years of toil, of blood, sweat, and tears building it.
Right.
And I was saying we couldn't go forward with that, and that was part of it.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he left the business. I found a new partner, Bob Murphy. He was one of our customers in New York who helped orchestrate Blake's buyout. And we bought him out of the business and became a SaaS business in 2005.
And went a different way. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a very pivotal point. And today you're global, you're publicly traded. How many employees, how many locations?
We're not publicly traded anymore. We just went private.
We're not publicly traded. Oh, you went private? Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations, I guess, on that.
We were bought. No, it's a very good thing. We were bought by Vista Equity Partners in February for $1.9 billion.
Okay. Well, I remember when you went public, so I wasn't aware that you'd been bought back. Well, great. Terrific.
We went public in June of 2015. Going public was a big moment for us. It really, first of all, it's a capital raising event. We raised $100 million, but also it was a brand expanding event, and it also causes a level of operating discipline, I think, has been extremely helpful. But it's also, after 3.5 years of that, it became a matter of diminishing returns on the amount of effort to run a public company, the grind of quarterly reporting. That it's about a month out of the CEO and CFO of a public company spend about 1 out of every 3 months engaged in investor relations, either prepping for the earnings call and earnings release, and then just meeting with investors.
Right.
And I think, larger companies, at some point, the CEO says, I'm not doing this anymore, and they have an IR team, investor relations team. But the smaller or the mid caps like us,
you don't have a choice.
You have to. If you don't show
they
up,
expect it. Yeah,
they expect it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So Vista bought us at a 68% premium to what we were trading at.
Congratulations.
And they're investing in our business. Thank you.
That's great.
They're enabling us to go back to making some longer term decisions about how we're going to develop our next generation products, how we're going to expand globally.
Giving you more time to do that. Great. Yeah. So how many employees, how many offices today?
We have 2,000 employees in 13 offices on 4 continents.
Oh, fantastic. And can you talk about your revenue now that you're private again, or the approximate level of where it is?
Yeah, we filed our plan. It's public information before we went private, saying we were going to do about $304 million in revenue this year.
Fantastic. Love it. Well, a couple of questions specifically to your, naval background. What would you say is kind of the most important thing that you learned during your, Annapolis years, then of course the 5-6 years out, in the water, so to speak, that you've applied to MindBody?
Well, number one is the effect of leadership, and effective leadership can transform an organization, particularly if the organization is about accomplishing something bigger than themselves. And if you look at the most inspiring companies today, they have some kind of purpose that really matters.
Yeah.
And it's not just about making money. And so MindBody's purpose is to help people lead healthier, happier lives by connecting the world to wellness. And that's a unifying purpose in our company. Well, the purpose of the U.S. Navy is, at the time that I was there, was to protect the free world.
Yeah.
And so that's a purpose-driven life. You don't do something like that because you want to make a lot of money. Because by the way, the money's not that great, and the hours are intense. So that Navy experience taught me that we should start our company with the why and consistently communicate that to the team. So we talk about our purpose regularly. We have a clearly stated set of core values that we recruit on, that we develop people on, that we promote on, and if necessary, we will separate people on if they don't align with our core values.
Right.
And all of that came from the Navy.
Yeah. Fantastic. How would you say your leadership style has evolved over time?
I think first of all, getting older is about seeing more depth. And, I was with some really smart folks last night, at dinner with them. They're entrepreneurs with a tech company and super smart. In fact, three of them are computer engineers. And they're very young, though. They're in their 20s. And I realized talking with them, first of all, it's wonderful, and I love being around young people, that the idealism and the excitement, particularly entrepreneurs. And, they see things in a bit more primary colors. And so the older I get, I think the less judgmental I am, the more open I am to just differing personalities and points of view,
right,
and appreciative of what are really intrinsic qualities. The more I value relationships. If I could go back to my 20-something self when I first arrived on that submarine, I would have said, it's all about the people. It's all about the relationships. That's what's really going to matter to you 20 years from now.
Yeah, so true. So true. Rick, you've been very generous with your time, but we've got a couple last questions I just can't, I've been waiting to ask. It's around this whole concept of people and how important they are in any organization, whether it's the Navy or a new startup or an established publicly traded company. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in?
Well, first and foremost, I want to know the why behind their choices they've made in their lives. Whether you've majored in computer science or French literature, whatever. The major itself is not of great importance. unless we're specifically talking about a skill set that you need for that job. What's more interesting to me is the why. And from that, you really learn about people's passion or lack of passion and their sense of purpose in their lives. And so we look first and foremost for people that are really purpose-driven, that have some kind of fire in their bellies. You know, we've talked a bit in this interview about what the fire in my belly was. You know, the first of all, the experiencing entrepreneurialism as a kid and seeing these family members who had started and run their own businesses, and secondly, the economic anxiety that really lit a fire in me to accomplish a great deal more. So we look for people like that. We look for people who really want their lives to matter, who enjoy succeeding as a team. And you know, one of our core values is being humble and helpful. So our first core value is committed to wellness, and it's both. Wellness is a multidimensional concept. It's not just physical fitness. I mean, we need to have a body that works, but we also need to have mental wellness and emotional well-being and social wellness. And so we look for that in people. Secondly, audaciously achieving, people that are just driven to achieve, and that's about that fire in the belly. Third, people that are humble and helpful. And I don't know how to teach humility. I think it's something our parents gave us. It maybe even goes deeper than that. But humble people accomplish the most. They're open to growth and change. They bring out the best in others rather than the opposite. And arrogant people tend to push off other people and cause the overall performance of the team to go down. And so these are the qualities that we look for. And then our last core value is continuously evolving or consciously evolving. And that is recognizing that each of us is completely free to wake up tomorrow and be just a little bit better, a little bit better in how we treat ourselves, how we treat each other, a little bit more knowledgeable in our work, a little bit more effective with our team and with our customers.
Nice. Yeah, very empathetic as well. I love it. Last question, Rick, and what career and life advice would you give to someone who is, their eyes on the corner office? Maybe they want to get there themselves in a company of your size, or perhaps start something on their own.
Well, I think first and foremost is to be valuable as you can be in your current role, whatever that role may be. If it's something that, even if it doesn't inspire you, I mean, multiple people have said, from Steve Jobs to many others, follow your passion, that thing that really lights you up. And that's true. However, you may find that your passion opens up in ways you never expected. It may not be in the direction that you bet on a few years ago. Instead, if you focus on what you're doing right now, how can you be of help to others? How can you help develop the value in your organization? What you'll find out is that you're more valuable than ever before in that organization when you take it that sort of humble, helpful approach. Meanwhile, having your eyes open and looking at what's going on both within the organization you're in and in other organizations, and just being curious and reading about and studying other companies, studying other walks of life. If you had told me at 33 that this is what I would have been doing at 53, I wouldn't even had a paradigm of understanding how. I would have asked you that, you mean yoga is a business? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. And so being open to the possibilities.
New ideas.
There's more than one successful path for everyone.
Right.
And if you're at a cusp of a decision in your life that's hard, where whether you're going to go left or go right is a tough choice, the chances are both paths will work. Because if one path was all rainbows and unicorns and the other path was ruination, well, that'd be a pretty easy choice, wouldn't it?
Right. But it's never that clear.
it's never that clear. And there's probably success down both paths. And the best thing you can do in that moment, as Yogi Berra would say, is when you get to a fork in the road, take it.
That's right. I love it. Well, we'll end on that note. Rick Stahlmeier, founder and CEO of MindBody, thank you very much for sharing your journey into the corner office today.
My pleasure, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.